One of my favorite columnists in the Epic Times is Jeffrey Tucker, and he writes a great piece regarding the U.S. manufacturing job loss that we've experienced in the United States. And this is the last issue this last week in 2024. Here it is in August. Jeffrey Tucker. So before we get to his article, I want to say a few words about NAFTA, about the loss of manufacturing jobs in the United States, and what really the globalists and the global elites have planned and the white-collar workers have desired, and how it has really hurt the blue-collar workers in America. So some of these figures were put together in 2017 by John Larabelle. You can find them in the New American magazine in 2017, the December 4th issue of that magazine. But the real issue is speaking about NAFTA and whether it has hurt or helped the U.S. economy, the American worker. And there are three areas that I want to think about. Number one, the jobs and the job loss that we've had because of NAFTA, just as Donald Trump has continued to tell us. Number two regards the trade deficit. It's amazing to see the gigantic turnaround on the trade deficit that occurred immediately after the passage of NAFTA, North American Free Trade Agreement, in the Clinton administration. We're talking way back in the Clinton administration, 1993. And so number three is the sovereignty of the United States. Really, that's the issue that is at stake here. I remember when NAFTA was being discussed and debated in the Congress, that at that time, Newt Gingrich was in the Congress, and he would tell us and told the American people that what we need to understand is that we are losing the sovereignty, the independence, that is, of the United States. One of the most amazing things, however, is one of the most amazing facts is that he himself voted in favor of the NAFTA agreement in spite of what he had to say. So that tells us a lot about the Newt Gingriches of the world who wanted the United States to lose, as he put it, our independence and our sovereignty. That's why I refer to many of them as neocons. But let's back up and start talking about or thinking about NAFTA. Does it equal prosperity and progress for the United States? That's what Bill Clinton had championed NAFTA on, that we would have more jobs, American jobs, good paying, as he would put it, good paying American jobs. On the other hand, Ross Perot warned of a giant sucking sound. You remember those days when he talked about the giant sucking sound that could be heard when American jobs are going to be lost heading south of the border to seek lower wages. Donald Trump campaigned on the claim that NAFTA was a disaster and that Mexico is ripping us off. So what's the truth? Here we are 30 years later, after the passage of NAFTA. What really has been the effect of it? Now, some say NAFTA has been good for the economy. They tell us the automotive industry, for example, still doing well, but what happened with the auto industry? The big three automakers, Detroit automakers, GM, Ford, and Chrysler, what happened? They all moved south of the border, production facilities in Mexico. Why do they do that? Because they pay the workers there less than 1/10 of what American workers have here. Those are blue-collar workers and people who are adept in trade and having learned a trade in skills in machinery, manufacturing. All of those jobs were lost to Mexico after NAFTA. As a matter of fact, 25% of the American economic base was rooted in manufacturing prior to the passage of NAFTA. But once NAFTA passed, do you realize that it went down within 1 year? It went down, that is our manufacturing base, to 12%. That, of course, was no accident. That is, the Democrats and the neocons, they wanted to lose our blue-collar jobs and send them south of the border or send them overseas to China, that at one time helps China out, at the same time destroys us and guts our economic base, and that is manufacturing. We no longer have a manufacturing base. And when we come to Jeffrey Tucker's article, he'll tell us some more statistics on that, which is even lower than 12%. of our entire base today. How about Hershey's chocolate bars? You know, those that you find in the grocery store. We all like chocolate bars. I especially, a chocoholic. Hershey's closed its plant in California. They closed the plants in Pennsylvania. They moved to a new facility in Monterrey, Mexico. 1,500 workers they put into jobs in Mexico. That was purposeful by the neocons and the Democrats who are trying to build up the foreign countries at the expense of the American worker. How about other candy makers such as Brock's and Nestle? They also moved production facilities to Mexico. Why? Cheap labor. At a Nestle plant in Toluca, a skilled machinery operator earns less than $20 per day. And we're talking 12-hour days here. No overtime pay, $20 per day, 12-hour days. At the same job in America, it would pay more than $20 per hour. So you can see that it incentivized, that is, NAFTA itself incentivized these jobs to go south of the border. Since 1997, the United States has lost more than 10,000 candy-making jobs because of cheap labor and lower raw material prices in Mexico and other nations. So number one, talking about job loss, NAFTA led to the loss of hundreds of thousands of U.S. jobs. Now, economists disagree on the numbers. Some say the number was close to 1 million jobs lost, but most were in the manufacturing industry in California, New York, Michigan, Texas. What happened, therefore, to the economies of these states? I'm in Texas. What happened? Right here in Wichita Falls, where I live. Right here in Wichita Falls, you can see many hollowed out ghost factories sitting around here, all the way through Iowa Park, all the way over to Henrietta. Ghost factories, places in Nocona that used to have great factories, great skilled workers, providing jobs for so many people, but now what? All replaced by Dairy Queen, replaced by McDonald's, replaced by Wendy's, these low-paying, non-skilled jobs. That's what's happened here. But who's making the money? The white-collar owners of these industries. And so these owners of these industries, the owners of these manufacturing plants, they're the ones receiving the money. Now, this is interesting that it's always been, I've always heard all my life, well, the Democrats are for the poor man and the Republicans are for the rich man. And so, you know, the Democrats want the poor. What nonsense. That is the opposite of the truth. It was by Democratic-led majority with Bill Clinton and the neocons assisting him, such as the Newt Gingriches, who passed our jobs off, that is, high-paying, skilled working jobs in the manufacturing base, to Mexico to be replaced by service industry jobs, hotel workers, hotel cleaners, someone going around cleaning houses, which are all honorable positions, but they don't pay as much as a skilled machinist. And we all know that to be the case. That's what happened. So that's number one, job loss. Now, people who defend NAFTA tell us, well, we have more jobs in the trade industry, so we have jobs that are created by trading with those other nations. That may be so, but the net loss is absolutely huge, and it tells us why all of these cities that used to be such great hubs of activity, people working, are now simply welfare cities, where people are simply living off the government dole. Then you have number two. Here's another net loss: trade deficits. Now, U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer, who was the trade representative for the Trump administration, praised certain aspects of NAFTA, but he noted in July that NAFTA, this was July of 2017, NAFTA has also created new problems for many American workers. Since the deal came into force in 1994, trade deficits have exploded. Thousands of factories have closed. Millions of Americans have found themselves stranded, no longer able to utilize the skills for which they had been trained. Well, that's NAFTA. So exactly how many? In the end of the day, we went down, once, as I pointed out a moment ago, we went down in our manufacturing job base to less than half of what it had been. But we're speaking about the trade deficits. We had at one time a 1.6 billion trade surplus with Mexico. That is, we were in the surplus. But that was before 1993 and Bill Clinton's passage of NAFTA. Here's the fact. Now we have a trade deficit with Mexico of more than $60 billion. Trade surplus, $1.6 billion. That is, we're pushing manufactured goods to them. Now we have $60 billion in trade deficit to Mexico. What does that mean? That means when you go to Walmart, you're going to find things made in Mexico or particularly made in China. And the same thing happened regarding China. This was all plotted and planned for years by globalists who wanted to build up these foreign countries, third world countries, at the expense of the American worker. That's what Donald Trump is wanting to stop. And that's why Donald Trump needs to get back into office. So, consider the garment industry, for example. We saw, after the passage of NAFTA, an 85% decline in those kinds of jobs because they go to China, Vietnam, and other Asian countries. But the real issue here, is the global economy. You hear all the time, we live in a global economy, a global economy, a global economy, and you hear that until you're sick of it. What does that mean? That means that the globalists, internationalists want us to be intertwined with foreign nations so that our destiny as America is intertwined and dependent upon the economy and the good fortune or the poor fortunes of other nations. So when Donald Trump was in office the last time, we had the pipeline that was going to bring oil down from Canada. We had independence on energy, but as soon as Biden came into office, he cut that off purposefully. Now we're so dependent upon Iranian oil, sending to them billions of dollars, building up their military, and now look what happens. They invade, of course, or they have harassed Israel through Hamas, Hezbollah, and also Russia. They have received so much money because of the Biden administration. This is the Democrats' internationalism. That's the real key to NAFTA, is that these globalists want us to be dependent upon foreign workers. Losing jobs to Mexico is not the only concern. It's not the main concern about NAFTA. The real concern is they do not, that is the Democrats who are basically socialists, they do not want us to be independent as a manufacturing base anymore. They want us to be dependent upon foreign nations, and that means they do not care for American sovereignty. The global economy means we have erased the sovereignty of the United States. They want us to be intertwined and dependent upon and under the auspices of a foreign world government. That's what's happening, and that's why NAFTA was passed in 1993, even though at that time, many people did not see it really for what it was. If you doubt that, you say, well, that's some conspiratorial theory. Just look what happened to Europe. It started as a small free trade agreement between a few countries that eventually became the European Union, a monster that now tells all the European countries what they can and can't do with their food standards, their food business, their businesses, economies, immigration policies, borders, and the will of the people can be hanged. And that doesn't matter what the people of Holland want to do. Doesn't matter what the Dutch farmers want. They are controlled by the European Union. That's exactly what the Bill Clintons, the Barack Obamas, as well as Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, that's what they want. They want an international economy. Now, let's look at Jeffrey Tucker's article for a few moments. His article is called U.S. Manufacturing Losses, Why the Denial? He says, one of my favorite columnists is Alicia Finley, She's defensive about a major issue driving U.S. politics today, and that is the gutting of U.S. manufacturing in dozens of industries. The meltdown has devastated dozens of industries such as steel, textiles, consumer electronics, semiconductors, furniture, tools, household appliances, shipbuilding, apparel, shoes, toys, small engines, and as we looked in the last segment, candy as well. And of course, automobiles. And her new column addresses, he says, my current obsession, which is why, in the last 40 years, why is it that the economic life in the United States has been transformed? A nation that was once known as the manufacturing capital of the world has lost its core. It has been replaced by something else. Vast numbers of the demographic who used to make things now do something else, and no one is entirely sure what. Financialization rules the day. So he says we know where the manufacturing went: China, Vietnam, ironically, Mexico, and other places. The grand excuse, and you hear this from some people who are conservatives: free trade, free trade, free trade, which is being seen as a higher state of being, leading to the grand goal of globalism and the end of the nation state as a functioning entity. That is exactly what we were just explaining. This is exactly the danger of NAFTA from the get-go, from this very beginning, to ship off our manufacturing base and now have a service-based industry, and the entire economy of the United States has changed, and now we're dependent upon foreign nations. So he says there are two ways to look at this reality. This is Jeffrey Tucker again. Some people say it is a disaster. I'm one of those. And they cite the physical infrastructure all over New England, the Rust Belt, and elsewhere. The whole of the country is littered with industrial corpses and broken lives as a result. The middle class was pillaged, and yet again with the pandemic response, leaving a widening wealth gap and a demoralized population. As for the much ballyhooed new industries, we see the transformation ongoing. What are the new industries? Wind turbines litter vast miles of Texas, and here we are in the plains of Texas, and you can't go anywhere without seeing huge miles and miles of just windmills everywhere, giant power lines carrying the windmill energy to big places like DFW, continuing to go on. At the same time, we have oceans of oil underneath our feet, but we have, because of the political class that's ruling this country, refused to tap into it. That's why I want Donald Trump in office. In New York City, Tucker writes, there are ongoing efforts to convert natural gas to electricity as powered by government-funded wind turbines emerge in Brooklyn. Eyesores that no one wants, no one voted for. All of this is forced by policy. And that's exactly what's taking place. We have the Department of Energy, unelected bureaucrats that are controlling what your landscape looks like and how you're going to live, what kind of energy you're going to use, all of that kind of thing. So this is very serious, massively dramatic, and a huge change in American history. It has produced a political movement in the United States that gains steam year after year, probably too late, but no one can understand the drive. At least we should be willing to understand the motivation if we are willing to look at the facts. All right, Tucker's writing. Jeffrey Tucker, he says, on the other hand, there are people out there who say, well, we have not really lost anything of real meaning. I just respectfully disagree. We've merely offshored annoying work and replaced it with cheap imports. We're living better as a result. Instead of working with the sweat of our brows to make stuff, we can now luxuriate in cubicles thanks to our college credentials and be happy as passive consumers of goods brought to us by crates from abroad in the same way that DoorDash and Instacart deliver our groceries. Now, these commentators, Tucker writes, many are colleagues and friends, are like the dog in the meme who sits there with the house on fire and says, this is fine. Now, these people are making a huge error in banking the status of market liberalism on the present status quo. In fact, this is not the free market at work at all. And I want you to note that, because this is indeed not the free market. If it was the free market, It would not be driven by government mandates. Do you realize that many manufacturing plants were told that they had to not only shut down operations, if they're going to shut down operations, they had to take everything out. They could not even leave anything in them because the government apparently didn't want them to come back into those manufacturing plants and restart again. They wanted to make it so difficult to revisit or come back to America, relocate here. So it's one of the unfolding great financial monetary Ponzi schemes in world history. Now, Jeffrey Tucker says, please understand some of my best intellectual colleagues defend all of this. Friends of mine with whom I agree on most everything are happy to proclaim all of this as wonderful evidence that everything is working, we're getting more prosperous, the world is opening up, and what we have here is nothing more than the kind of creative destruction a market-driven global order creates. But what I don't get is why people cannot write about this without at least admitting reality. And reality is that they are denying what is right before them and what the figures are saying. He says, instead my favorite Wall Street Journal columnist claims that manufacturing jobs have merely geographically shifted from union-controlled high-tax states to lower-priced labor states without lower taxes. Yeah, that assumes, now let's just stop here for a moment, that assumes that this is a global, we're interested in the globe and not America first. You see, this is why the white collars of America hate Donald Trump, the liberals, because they believe the states such as the European Union and such as China, Central America, South America, they believe that we're helping them, and that's our obligation. So they have made this possible by passing NAFTA. That's exactly what's happening. They wanted globalism, internationalism. But he says, what I do not understand is why they are not confessing reality. Well, the reason they're not confessing reality, and I'll add this to Jeffrey Tucker's article, is because of what we've been talking about. The reality is we've lost all of these jobs, and our manufacturing base has gone down even from 12%. Now I think it's about 6%. And that is where low-skilled labor, we have low, so now the wages are coming down in America while they're going up in other places, and that is all part of the grand design. And that's exactly what's happening. He says there's an element of that, and nothing has one nothing has one causal variable, but there is no question that as a percent of the workforce, manufacturing has fallen from 35% or so down to 6%. That's shocking, isn't it? Or rather 8%, that was 35% in 1950, 8% today. So why don't they mention that? The reason is obvious. They don't want people to realize, just as Ross Perot put it correctly, the great sucking sound taking our good paying jobs overseas. That's what's happening. And that's why it's important that Donald Trump gets back into office. It's America First agenda. And nationalism is not a dirty word if it means simply putting America first. And that is treating the workers here and giving them good jobs, not simply service industry jobs. Working at McDonald's is a legitimate work, but it is not a service industry job. I cannot even have a high school degree and work at McDonald's. But we need manufacturing jobs, and that's why we need Donald Trump back in office.